Welcome to Seller Sessions. I am your host today, Sharon Evan, and today I have with me Frederick from Compliance Gate. Frederick, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, late afternoon here in Hong Kong, but everything is okay.
Awesome. So, Frederick, I found you while actually I'm a customer of yours on Compliance Gate, and I was doing this report for getting information on a product that actually one of my clients was is importing. And I saw this tool that you guys have at Compliance Gate, and it blew my mind away for how much knowledge there is in this tool. And I was like, I have to bring you on the podcast so that we can talk a little bit about compliance, because it's such an ugly subject or a boring subject, but it's such an important subject because people don't understand, that they're responsible for the compliance of their products. So I reached out to you, and I found out that from watching all sorts of your webinars and things like that, that you have actually done a lot in you're young. You've done a lot on anything to do with product development, really. So can you give us a little bit of a backstory for who you are, how you ended up in Hong Kong, and what it is that you sort of do for those people that don't know you?
Yeah, so I'm Swedish. I moved to Asia, well, specifically to mainland China, in 2009. Before that, I was studying electronic engineering, but I never really worked as a proper engineer. Anyway, long story short, I started to work with sourcing and product development in Shanghai in 2011, and something I learned early on, working with importers that in turn selling to retailers in Scandinavia primarily at the time. None of them really understood compliance, and we didn't understand compliance either. We could have a buyer coming to us planning to buy a plastic product and saying, oh, well, we need some sort of test report, some sort of chemical test report, because the purchasing manager, some retailer, they're asking for it. We go to the supplier, and they don't really have an idea. They manage to find something, some from some subcontractor, some PDF. We send it back to them, and they say, well, I guess this is enough. And this is back in 2011, 2012. And slowly I started to realize that, wow, this is really a big problem here. The suppliers don't understand it. They don't know what CE marking is. They don't understand these standards. They have no clue. Likewise, the buyers, even on a fairly high level, really struggle to understand labeling requirements, certification requirements, and responsibility. You ask a manufacturer, they will say, well, I'm in China, I'm in Vietnam. I don't understand this. We don't have lawyers or compliance consultants giving us information about various regulations overseas and so on. So I started to understand that this is really an issue. Later on, I was in Vietnam, also worked in manufacturing, and then in 2018 we set up here in Hong Kong. Reason being that we have various websites like Compliance Gate, China and Portugal, and it's just easier for us to be based here, webinars and so on. So that's really my background. My background is manufacturing. I identified compliance or product safety in general as a really, really big problem for importers and for suppliers.
Yeah, it's I think that people sort of don't understand how important the subject is, and not only that, you don't know what you don't know. So as a seller and as someone who's importing into America, sometimes you just don't know that you need a certain certification because you didn't, you don't know to even look for it because you didn't even know that you need it. So this podcast obviously is specifically more focused on Amazon sellers, and I know that you have a lot of resources also for Amazon sellers, and you're pretty savvy when it comes to also understanding Amazon well, there isn't such a thing, I guess, as Amazon compliance because they comply by regulations and marketplaces. But you've worked with many Amazon sellers as well. So on an Amazon level, I know the answer to this, but I'd like for you to say it. Let's just say if I'm now importing or I'm now wanting to sell a product on Amazon, and who is now, first of all, responsible for the compliance of the product that I'm going to be selling on Amazon? Am I responsible for the compliance of the product? Is it my supplier that's responsible for making sure that it's compliant? Who is responsible for that? And then what kind of certifications are regular certifications that Amazon is asking for people to get? And I know it's a super broad subject because there's so many different products, but what are some things that most people would need for, some typical products on an Amazon level?
Right. So first of all, Amazon is not really making up their own compliance requirements, meaning labeling requirements, documentation requirements, lab testing requirements, and so on. They reflect the compliance requirements in each respective market. So if I'm selling, say, children's products in the United States, I need to comply with children's products regulations in the United States. If I sell in the EU, then EU regulations apply. So that's important to understand. Now, there are exceptions. One example is bisphenol A. My understanding is that Amazon has actually banned bisphenol A in all products sold on the platform, even though that is not required for all products in the United States. So we're seeing more of that, and it's up to them if they want to raise the bar, which some retailers actually do for themselves. Then that's something that they could actually do in the future. But broadly speaking, it really comes down to the compliance requirements in that specific market. So we receive reports from sellers, basically emails, from Amazon sellers, be it in China or the US and so on, that either they are subject to a compliance review or they can't list a new product. And the documentation that Amazon is asking for, it depends on the compliance requirements that apply to that specific product. I can give you a few examples. One example is children's products in the United States. They will ask for a lab test report. They will ask for a children's product certificate. And we can go into details about that later on. They may also ask for photocopies of product labels, packaging, and so on, to also determine if it's correctly labeled. We received a report in late 2020 from a seller in the UK. Amazon revoked their product based on the fact that they could not provide a substance test report. That was interesting because they did that request for jewelry. Non-children's jewelry. And what that potentially indicates is that, okay, comes to children's products is pretty clear. I can understand why Amazon is putting a lot of resources into, say, policing their platform when it comes to stuff like cosmetics or children's products and so on, right? But this is indicating that Amazon is really taking this a step further, because the same chemical requirements or heavy metals requirements under REACH in the EU can also be said to apply to pretty much everything. So this is also evolving, and I don't really have all the answers. I don't know exactly how they, let's say, prioritize product categories at this point. Another thing, we have received many reports in the last, let's say, this year, since 2021 started, sellers being rejected because they don't have the correct company name on the packaging, for example. So we see this sort of come in waves, and it's definitely evolving. So I'm also learning a lot when it comes to this, but we receive reports at least, I wouldn't say daily, but at least a few times every week from Amazon sellers. Yeah.
From one of the questions I get asked all the time from sellers is, what is the certification that Amazon is going to ask me for this product? And the thing is, and I did know this, but I actually also learned this from you from watching one of your webinars, is there is no such thing as Amazon regulations. It's Amazon, and that you said this earlier, but I want to say it again, is Amazon abides and asks for certifications that you need for the specific marketplace that you're selling in. So there is no such thing as getting certificates only for Amazon. It's certifications that you need in general for selling a specific product. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, broadly speaking, yes.
Yeah, because it is something that a lot of people say. Back in the days, we used to say to people, just create a ghost listing. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Create a ghost listing on Amazon, a fake listing, and then Amazon turn it to FBA, and then Amazon will tell you what certifications they need you to have, right? That is something that people used to do. Today, to create a ghost listing or a fake listing is a lot harder than what it used to be. So, and when I heard your webinar, I was like, people don't even need to understand what certifications they need from Amazon. In general, they just need to understand what certifications they need to sell a product in general. That's what I'm trying to say, because, you know, it's sometimes Amazon can come and ask you for a certification a year after you're selling it, like you had also with one of your clients. So there is another question is, who is responsible for, I've had a lot of people say to me, well, my supplier didn't tell me that I need that certification. So who is responsible for, when it comes to understanding compliance, or what certifications you need for a specific product? Is it logical that people expect their suppliers to tell them, you know, what certificates they need, or is it up to the seller themselves, obviously, to understand what sort of certifications they need for a specific product?
Now, when it comes to compliance requirements, which often go beyond certification, I think the next thing we should actually discuss is a breakdown of what certification and labeling and so on is. When it comes to responsibility, however, it really comes down to, are you importing the product or not? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the US, you're importing from China, or well, you're importing from anywhere really. You're responsible for placing that product on the market. It's the same thing if you're based in the EU, or not just the EU, the US. If you're based in Israel, Canada, Australia, anywhere, you're responsible for the product that you place on the market. There are situations in which they will refer to the manufacturer, for example. There's a lot of confusion around that. The thing is that when it comes to various product regulations, the importer is considered to be the manufacturer, and especially so if it's a private label product, meaning with your brand, even more so if it's something that you have designed in-house, even if it's something minor. And another thing I want to mention is that now, even in this scenario when you will not be responsible, now what would that mean? Well, it wouldn't really make any difference, because Amazon would still delist you, they would still reject you on the basis that you're selling a non-compliant product, and say, okay, you go and pursue your supplier in Shenzhen or Ho Chi Minh City or Mumbai. Good luck. Okay. Yeah. And then you can spend whatever money you still have on trying to pursue that supplier. So in practice, it is not really a workable approach anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I got it. While you're talking, I was bringing up Alibaba, and I was looking at all the different certifications that there are when you're looking for a supplier, and it can be very confusing. You know what? Not even for new sellers. It can even be, you could be an experienced seller, but you're getting into a new product, and you don't even necessarily know what kind of certifications you need, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I am now, what would be your best advice for someone who's, for example, is going to be selling a product and they don't know what types of certificates they may need for that product, right? Where would be, like, what is a good resource? Obviously, we've got Compliance Gate, and I'm actually going to show one of the reports, if that's okay with you, that I downloaded. So because I think it's just such an important thing for people to be able to know. But apart from that, where would somebody start for understanding what kind of certificates they would need? So let's just say if I want to sell a a chopping board, right? Which is a wooden product. How would I even know now? Because most people don't even think about certificates. How would I even know what I need in order to import that product into the US? Where would I even go to start to find those resources?
Yeah, a big problem when it comes to finding this information is that it's scattered. Okay, so
Yeah.
you got the CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They're responsible for overseeing regulations and matters related to some consumer products and also children's products on a federal level in the United States. Now, I think it's the Agricultural Department, APHIS. That's where you have to go looking for information about compliance requirements concerning wooden products. And then if that wooden product is also supposed to be in contact with food or beverage, let's say, I don't know, a fruit bowl or something, you need to check out the FDA website. Now, in addition to that, you also have other labeling requirements. So you may also have to check out the FTC website. And that's really my best recommendation to navigate these government websites. In the EU, there's ec.europa.eu, so it's all gathered on one single platform, more or less, whereas in the United States it's a bit more scattered. Another option is to find a consultant, and that's what I recommend, to have a professional to basically make an assessment. A third way is to get in touch with a testing company and say, okay, I got this product, could be Intertech, TUV, Kima, for example, and ask them for an assessment on the testing standards that may apply to your product. They often go by on testing standards. They also tend to list the different regulations, safety standards, and so on that they believe apply to a certain product. So that could really help you out to at least start to digest this information and move forward. The thing, though, with labs is that they may indeed list the certain regulations and the safety standards, but they generally do not provide information concerning documentation. That could be certificates, self-issued declarations, user manuals, technical files, labeling requirements for the product, for the packaging. And to be honest, as of today, I'm not aware of any go-to resource where you can just type in a product name and you're going to find everything, including us. Okay. So yeah, that's it. It is tricky to find information. And then I don't want to even get started, but then you also have on a US state level, you have regulations in California, in Washington, and so on. Well, not just these states, it's all states. So yeah, it can be quite tricky to make that assessment initially.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that you said there was another option is to reach out to also a SGS, Intertech, whatever it may be, and ask them. That's a great thing. One of the things that I know that people used to do back in the day is to go into a Walmart or into a certain department store and sort of look at the back of a packaging, which I don't think is the best advice, but I think that it was also sort of a starting point back in the day as well. So if I now, and this is something I get asked all the time, let's just say now that for complete newbies that are looking into, again, let's just say a certain type of product, where should we be getting the tests done? And this is something I get asked all the time. Are the tests done in China if it's from China? Are the tests done in America if it's in America? Like, where do the tests actually need to be done, and what countries? In the country that you're importing into, how does it work on a testing level?
So I'm going to give you two examples, one for the US, one for the EU. And when it comes to the US, you're selling children's products. The test must be done by a CPSC accepted testing company. The information is not secret. They have a database that you can search on their website. Just Google that and you will find a database. What this means is that unless the company and the specific lab is on the list, they will not accept that. That means that whatever certificate you issue based on that test report is invalid. And Amazon, they also know, they also cross-reference with that list. However, companies like Kima, founded in Hong Kong, they now have facilities, at least one in the United States. But my understanding is that when it comes to children's product testing for the US, most of that is still done in mainland China. But the facility is still on the list. Not really about the geography. Now, this could be the case for, say, pharma products or medical devices that we don't, that's like outside of my area of expertise. So it could be the case. I'm not going to sit there and say that that's never the case. Another scenario is a bit more ambiguous. I was discussing this with regulators in the EU, discussing problems with, well, compliance issues, safety issues concerning electronics, specifically imported from China in that case, that they had problems with. They were receiving reports and recalls and so on. And I asked them, many of these suppliers and importers, they rely on test reports from companies, which I will not mention, but let's say that some of them have quite exotic names. Nobody's ever heard of them. They got a logo that looks sort of like SGS, but it's not SGS. It's called something else, SSW or whatever. And I asked them, do you have a list, say, for electronics or other CE products in the EU? This was in 2018, I think, from which you only accept test results. And they said no, but we do make this assessment on a case-to-case basis. So if it's something that we never heard of before, we may not accept that lab test report. We don't take it at face value. What I want to get to is, regardless, work with a established testing company. That's really, really important, even if it's the case that you don't actually need to get your product tested with a specific company. End of the day, you want testing to not just produce a piece of paper. You want this test to verify that your product is compliant, that this product is safe. This is serious business. Without going into details, the chemicals in our products affect fertility, diseases, especially in children, phone chargers exploding, and so on and so on. So,
Hoverboards.
yeah. But I think those are really, that was one of the first major stories. That was back in 2015. And let's say I wasn't really surprised when that hit the news. But this is about so much more than just trying to get that piece of paper. It should be in your interest as an importer, as a seller, to actually verify that the products you sell are compliant.
Yeah. I think that that's a really important thing that you just said there, because a lot of people are just trying to make sure that they've got the certificate to be able to sell on Amazon, when in reality, you got to make sure that your product is actually safe. No one's going to die, that it's not going to be able to harm anyone, etc. So I think that's a really important subject in general, and something that people should take into consideration. How can somebody know if their supplier is capable of passing a test? So, most people usually nowadays, especially because we can't fly out to China, are using something like Alibaba to look for suppliers, right? And let's just say that let's just use the toy for an example. How do you know if your supplier's even going to be able to pass certain tests? What kind of advice can you give to people of what to look out for when it comes to suppliers?
Yeah, that's a very big thing. Now, when it comes to sourcing suppliers, that's something to start very, very early. The first thing you need to do if you're setting out to get a new product manufactured, private label, custom design, is to assess which, let's say, regulations, labeling requirements, and standards apply to that product before you even start sourcing suppliers. Now, once you get to the stage when you go to filter suppliers on, say, Alibaba or global sources, or even at a trade show, even though that's not an option right now, you will see in the supplier profiles, they may mention CE, they may mention CPSIA, ASTM, F963, etc. They may also upload test reports, provide photocopies. What does this mean in practice? Well, what it doesn't mean, and I want this to be very, very clear for everyone listening to this, you cannot apply whatever you find on their website to your product. Okay, this is not about finding a supplier with the certificate. First of all, a test report cannot be applied to an entire company. There's no such thing as a certified supplier. Well, there is in some respects, but not in a way that really applies to the compliance process from your perspective as a seller, as an importer. So what does it mean? Why do we value these, let's say, mentions of compliance documents? Because it gives me an indication. Now, keep in mind, my background is in manufacturing. Just knowing, having, just understanding the compliance requirements as written on paper is one thing. Understanding what this means in practice is another. So what I want to get to is this. It gives me an indication. It gives me an indication that this supplier has at some point made a product in compliance with a certain regulation or standard. And that's it. Now, this can manifest in, okay, they mentioned REACH. This means that they perhaps 5 years ago, they made a product for a customer, likely a big customer, that forced them to ensure REACH compliance, meaning they had to in turn procure certain materials that were REACH compliant. Okay. Well, when I worked in early years in Shanghai, I was sitting down with manufacturers, helping customers to buy PVC plastics. It's a toxic plastic. And that supplier, we picked them because they claim that, yeah, we can make REACH compliant PVC materials. Okay. We sat down, they said, okay, we can get that manufactured. It means that we need to use certain substances, or maybe not use certain substances. I can't remember, in order to not have certain phthalates and other plasticizers in the material. When they listed that on their Alibaba, they were indicating, we have experience with this, but you can't take that test report and apply it to your product. Okay. It gives me an indication. It means that, I should go with a supplier that mentions this, because it's more likely that they have the expertise to design for compliance, and that they have material suppliers that can provide, say, fabrics, hardware parts, plastics that don't contain these substances. And it's not really about the type of plastic. You can have a PVC, it can be made to comply with certain regulations, meaning that it can be made to not include certain chemicals in the manufacturing procedure. I know it sounds complicated, because it is fairly complicated, and it really goes to the very core of the production lines and lubricants in the machines. And yeah, that's really the detail we need to go to in order to make sense of this.
So what you're saying is, when you're looking for a supplier, if you see that they have certifications, that is a plus, because they have passed or made products in the past that have passed for that specific certificate needed, or specific standard needed, which is a good sign, because they were able to pass it in the past. But you cannot take that certification and apply that in any way to your specific product. You will still need to get testing, but it is a plus if they've already passed it. Is that me understanding you correctly?
It gives me an idea that, okay, this supplier has some experience. That's it. Yeah, that's it really. Like it's on par with someone, you're looking at a CV, prospective employee, and okay, well, you go through high school. That's good. That's about it. It doesn't really tell me anything else. I can give you another example. That was with another Scandinavian customer, and they were buying these bean bags, and they had to comply with some flammability requirement. We sourced suppliers, and we found this manufacturer in Hangzhou, and they mentioned these specific standards. which that's a pretty good sign, when they go and they list, yeah, we can comply or blah 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 with EN123. I can't remember, and gave a report to the customer. They went ahead, placed an order with this supplier, but in between we're buying samples and so on. We were not to do an inspection. It was back when I was actually visiting factories, and I remember sitting in the car, picked me up from the train station, and I asked him, so yeah, we're gonna do the flammability test and so on. You sure you can pass this EN standard? No, we didn't make this in compliance with this EN standard. Well, that could be a problem. Why didn't you? Oh, the customer didn't say anything about it. Okay. Well, not a major surprise. So I got back to him. Well, the purchasing manager, I don't know, next day or something, and gave him a test report, explained the situation, and he said, well, I mean, they should know, right? Because we're from Europe, and we're going to sell this in the EU, and it said on the website that they had made this in compliance. But the thing is that they were never told. The supply didn't know. Supply did not receive explicit instructions. So what I want to get to is there's no supplier that is exclusively making by default products in compliance with, say, EU or US regulations. It means they have the capability. And if you tell me, if you inform me, you give me explicit instructions, then I will procure the type of foam, in this case for the bean bags, or whatever they have inside, that is compliant with this flammability standard. So you need to think like a manufacturer in order to understand this. And a big problem, many problems in compliance arise from these assumptions. They should know, they should do this, so that maybe they should, but doesn't matter when you lose $50,000 because you made an assumption. It doesn't matter. So this is just one example of how making that assumption, looking at a supplier page, how that can really blow up.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me from what you said there is you really need to know everything about your product. And that comes back to also product development in general. You can't just rely on a supplier to know what it is that you need to comply with. You really need to know yourself, so you can say it from day one. Like with the product that that needed, you were going to have the flame test, the flammability testing. It's I get what you're saying is, on the one hand, maybe they should have known, but on the other hand, it's really up to you to come and say, we need you to be able to make a product that is going to be able to pass this test. And the thing is, you need to know that yourself as the seller, as the importer, whatever it is. So I think this also all comes back down to, you have to understand your product, and you have to understand the market and the regulations into the market that you're selling to, in order to understand what types of certifications or compliance it is that you're going to need to abide by. I understand that this is a very broad subject, because you can't give one advice on all products, because it doesn't exist. Every single product may require totally different certifications according to the market, to materials, etc. So I'm not going to go too much into the details of it, but I would like to spend a minute talking about product packaging, because it is something that a lot of people really don't even know. People think that all you really need is, you just need to have made in China, and that's it. That's all you need to have. Whereas, first of all, EU regulations aren't necessarily the same as the US regulations for packaging, right? And there are certain things that you would need to have on your packaging also according to different products. So can you give us a little bit of information? I know it's broad, but a little bit of broad information on when it comes to product packaging, and some things that are a must for people to have on their packaging, and any sort of tips that you can give when it comes to product packaging.
Yeah, so number one is labeling requirements, and labeling requirements not just for packaging but also for the product. Country of origin is one. That's for the United States. CE mark in the EU. Tracking labels, that's mandatory for many products both in the EU and the US, and also other markets around the world. What else do we have? Textiles labeling. So some of them also applies to the packaging. CE marking is one example. Country of origin could be the case, and it's up to you to really, let's say, incorporate this into your artwork design. You
Yep.
don't send a unfinished artwork file to a supplier and hope they will somehow wrap that up for you. Literally in this case, no, you need a CE mark. That CE mark is in the print file. They print it. That's it. They don't know if you need a CE mark or not. It's your factory in China or Vietnam or anywhere for that matter. They don't care. They shouldn't need to care. They
Yeah,
print
it's up
it.
to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's up to you to make sure that your artwork files cover everything. Another thing that we see is started to receive a lot of reports about Amazon complaining about lacking importer name, meaning the company name, address, and also contact details on the packaging. And we did some research into this to understand, okay, where are they getting this from? And we found that it is mentioned in in various regulations and directives in the EU, and also by certain packaging regulations in the United States. Why this is being, a lot of importers in general being caught off guard is because just because this is written somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that the various customs authorities in the EU or the US really bothered to return packages and so on. It will be extremely expensive for them to make an assessment on a case-to-case basis. And now all of a sudden Amazon is coming and complaining about this. Well, the reason is that Amazon is a lot more effective at policing this than let's say the customs authorities and market surveillance authorities have ever been, which rely on random checks and also the more serious compliance problems on the market. Okay, so number one is labeling. Then there's also substance restrictions. Cover heavy metals in packaging materials. There's a regulation on EU level, and then I know that there are, I can't remember, but many states in the US also have regulations that set limits on heavy metals in packaging. And there are some testing companies that they have some sort of uniform test. To my understanding is they want to help you cover all state regulations in the United States to make sure your product is compliant. Basically, they compile all the different heavy metals that are restricted, and then they probably put it at the lowest limit. Okay, so if California has the lowest limit for lead and Washington for mercury, then they just combine those. That's my understanding. And in the EU, that's unified. And then you can get a test report. But to be honest, at least going back a few years, it was quite rare that any of our customers coming to us and asking about packaging testing. Haven't seen Amazon reject any sellers specifically for that reason, but yeah, you never know. It could change tomorrow. But yeah, it's definitely a thing. Both labeling, that's absolutely essential, and also substance testing for the packaging material itself. The good thing about substance testing for the packaging material is that it's not necessarily that expensive, because it's just one material. There are different print colors, but the testing companies tend to quote not more than $100 or so, sometimes even less, maybe even 50. It's significantly cheaper to test a packaging compared to a more complex consumer product.
So you're talking about if I have a cardboard box for my product, let's just say I've got a cardboard box right here, right? You're talking about having the actual cardboard box package, like the packaging itself passing a test, right? That's what you're talking about as well on top of it. Is that important for only Europe or also America?
Well, there are substance restrictions in place also in the United States. So whether that's important, that really comes down to, what's your budget? Is it enforced? These things. But end of the day, you know, the only recommendation I can give to anyone listening to this is that, yeah, don't skip out on testing, because if that's written somewhere, then it's only one way to verify compliance.
Mm. Um, I actually want to, before I show a report for a second, because I think that you guys have built an amazing tool, and you know this podcast is very, you know, anti specifically talking about softwares or things like that, but I think that your tool specifically is a great resource, right? That's what it is. It's a resource because you guys are not, you know, you're not lawyers, you're not a compliance agent, or you're a resource where you've taken a whole bunch of information and you've put it in one place. And I think that it's just a great tool that you guys have. And I want to show one of your reports, because I think that it can be very beneficial. But before I do, if we could talk about, we said that we'll do like a tiny little sort of what a case study would look like if we were making a children's toy, for example. Actually, just before I get into that, I just wanted to say one last thing, was that what we need to also remember is that if you're selling a product in the US, just going back to product packaging, your product packaging requirements may not be the same in Canada. They may not be the same in Europe. They're probably not going to be the same in Europe. I'm pretty sure that there are certain places in Canada where product packaging also needs to have both English and French, for example, similar in other countries. So just remember, for people listening to us, that you may need to actually have different product packaging made for different countries, or at least have a label on top of that. Would that be correct? Because sometimes you can just put a sticker on top of your, let's just say, normal USA packaging. You can put a sticker in a different language or whatever it may be on top of your packaging. Would you say that's correct, Frederick?
Well, it depends on the labeling requirement, but broadly speaking, it's often required that it is permanently affixed.
Permanent.
And the thing is that that's something that's also important to understand, that it's not like explicitly written in these regulations and directives. Can I use a sticker? No. Can I put a virtual address? Yes, you can. No, it's not written. You know, those terms don't exist. And I can't sit around and make interpretations. Same with the testing companies. The only thing the testing company or compliance consultant can do is to say, oh, well, you know, I found this list of documents that you need, and I found it in the source. And yeah, you know, we're not great at, you know, finding ways around this or yeah, things like that. So that's the thing. Can you put a sticker on? Yeah, I don't know. It's not really stated anywhere. It could be written that it has to be permanent. But a safe bet is anyway to make sure it's printed on the artwork.
Yeah, that I agree with that. I think another thing is that if you're selling specifically in Amazon, then it goes back to what I originally said when we started the podcast was, it's not that Amazon has their own regulations. It's that Amazon abides by certain regulations. And I think I take back what I said in the beginning. It's not that you need to know what Amazon needs, it's you need to know what the regulations are. I would say that instead, I take back what I said in the beginning, is it is important to understand specifically what Amazon needs for you to be able to list your product. And the same way that if you're selling to Walmart, Target, or whatever, you can just go to them and ask them, what do you need for me to have on my packaging, for example, right? What are different, because you're saying that there isn't just one thing for every product, or maybe you can have a sticker, or maybe you can't. I know that there's products that I live in Israel, that I'll go to the shop of very, you know, a very well-known shops that are, you know, like Walmart or things like that. And I'll buy even a beauty product, and on the back of it, there'll be a sticker in Hebrew on top of the English, right? So I think that it does matter about countries, and it does matter. And probably a good thing to do is just to also ask the wholesaler, for example, that you're going to, would you agree with that you're going to sell in, etc.? Would that be something you agree with?
Well, all I can say is that some of our customers are, for example, let's say they are going to sell watches in you know, some EU country. They know they need some sort of user manual. really basic stuff, explain what sort of battery you need, step by step on how to replace the battery, open the lid, blah blah blah. And yeah, sometimes they read the directives, but they also just buy a watch from another brand, Daniel Wellington or something, and you can't copy that because that could be it's their copyright, but it can still give you an idea about the structure.
Yeah.
Likewise, product labels. It's fairly likely that, say, Mattel, they know how to label toys. They know how that works. They know what they need to include, and yeah, why not use that as some sort of reference point?
Yeah. All right. So if we could do a quick scenario of, let's just say that I want to now import a toy into, let's say, America, right? Then what would be my steps on a compliance level that I would take? And I'm going to sell this toy specifically on Amazon.
Okay. Now, number one, I will reach out to a testing company, ask them to confirm, to give me a list of testing standards and safety requirements, basically, which could be a certain ASTM standard, or they could also list certain substance restrictions. The second thing you need to do is to issue a CPC, a Children's Product Certificate, that's issued based on a lab test result. And I'm going to get to the lab testing part in a bit. But you can't issue a CPC without a test report. Now, the CPC itself is self-issued. You can find free templates on the CPSC website. So it's not something you obtain. It's not an approval from the CPSC itself or anything like that. It's not something you get from the supplier. It has to be issued in your name if you import the product. It's supposed to be for use, import, or domestic manufacture in the United States. Okay. And then you need to create a tracking label. It's similar. You need to include certain product information, a batch number. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And you send that to your supplier. That's something that would go into your product specification. So that's not, you don't get the label, you don't obtain the label from any outside party. Okay. So now you have the certificate that you created yourself using your Google Docs or whatever, and you also made your label file. You've also assessed the standards that apply, because you need to put that into the CPC. Otherwise, you can't complete it. Now, you also need third-party testing. It needs to be from a CPSC accepted testing company, which I explained earlier. And if I remember correctly, now keep in mind, I'm not a living oracle. I don't know everything about everything. My core expertise is really, when it comes to the compliance aspect, it's really how things work, or, well, don't work when it comes to the manufacturing processes. Of course, I do have a pretty deep understanding for the specifics, the specific requirements themselves too. But when it comes to testing, my understanding is for children's products, you have to do it on a batch level, meaning it has to be from the same batch that you place on the market. What this means is that, okay, you're sourcing a product, say a private label product on Alibaba. Okay, this is not unique to Alibaba. Alibaba doesn't have any safety problems or anything like that. It could be anywhere for that matter. And you find this private label product. Okay, you could actually choose to get it tested before mass production, but I don't think you can use that test report. The reason is that it's a pre-production sample. It could be the same colors. It could be the exact same material, well, the same type of materials, but it's manufactured at different times. And it could be, even if it's the same material supplier, say for baby clothing or something, maybe it's the exact same supplier for the fabric, but it may not be the same batch, and you don't know that. You can't verify that, meaning that, okay, you can do pre-production testing for the sake of verifying the construction, because they don't just check substances, they also check the construction, the physical properties, small parts, and so on. They make a very, very well-rounded safety assessment and safety test when they execute these lab test procedures. So you can choose to do that pre-production for the sake of avoiding going into production based on a design that will eventually not pass testing, and it's not fun to find out once you pay deposits, or even worse, paid everything in full, because you're never going to see that money again. You're never going to get a refund if you fail testing later on. Now, compliance can start even earlier. Now, let's say that I work for one of the big companies. Okay, I'm going to launch a new Star Wars toy or whatever. They don't wait until everything is finished. No, they will make an assessment at the drawing board. They have experts making an assessment based on paper drawings, or digital drawings these days. Does this pose a risk? Can this break off? Now, I understand those tools are, well, not really what everyday sellers, well, medium or small sellers have access to. But if you're going to design something from scratch, you may need to have a consultant actually review the design drawings. You don't want to spend $10,000 on molds and tooling that are inherently non-compliant, because that little plastic part can break off. That is a small part, and you can't sell it. It's illegal to certain age groups anyway. Okay, it's really engineering. There's so much more than just having a list of compliance requirements, and the process depends very, very much on, okay, is this a private label product? Is this a custom design product? So broadly speaking, you need to create the label files, you need to create your own certificate, and you need to get it lab tested. But in the end, it's the last test that really matters. You may also need to have a registration card, that's children's furniture and so on, durable children's, and, well, I think they call it durable infant products. It's all available on the CPSC website. These government websites are actually pretty clear. It's just that they are in silos. But check out the CPSIA pages if you're a children's product seller for the US market. The CPSC is pretty clear. And on top of that, they also have a free service called the Small Business Ombudsman. So they answer questions free of charge. It's fantastic. I don't think they really review your CPC and so on, but they provide this guidance free of charge, and they normally respond within a couple of days. It's just that they don't cover, let's say, other aspects, and you have to go to other websites and so on.
So that brings me back to why I think that also what you guys have also created is amazing. Can you see my screen, Frederick?
Yeah.
So I'm sharing my screen right now, and this is a test. Well, this is basically the way it works, that your tool asks a whole bunch of questions, about broad questions. I will say that you do start from the very beginning saying that, you guys are not, you've got disclaimers here that you're not going to cover every single scenario, etc. It's important. But I basically here ticked off everything, every worst case scenario that there could be. So it was specifically for America. And I just said every worst case scenario that it could be for specifically a child's product, right? So you can see here, you guys have said that you may need, well, you'll need a CPSIA. Here you've got for the CPC, you've got links for everything. You've got ASTM standards, you've got, the lab test, you've got links here. So what you guys have created here for the CPC, what you guys have created is basically, you've taken all the resources that, not all, but many resources that one would need, and you've put it into a PDF file instead of them needing to go and Google everything. Would that be a correct assumption of what this is?
Yeah, the idea is that this gives you a first step. It helps you to save time when doing the research, but it's only a first step. And I want to be very clear about that. We have written summaries, okay? We don't make our own interpretations or anything like that. This is just providing information, and then you can also use the sources to go deeper. But yeah, it's at least helping you with the initial research.
Yeah. You can see here, you talk, packaging requirements, bagification warnings, country of origin, import information. You guys have all not all, but many of the information. It's like you said, it's a starting point that you may need for that specific category that the person has selected for that product. And I just think that it's, I'm talking from my experience of being a user that uses your tool. I just think that it's such a great starting point for people. And like I said, because many times you don't know what you don't know. Now, I do think that in some cases, people should be hiring a compliance consultant. I think in many cases, it's also important to, but not everyone needs to. Sometimes it's just a matter of being resourceful, Google, etc. And the fact that you guys have just put everything in one place, I think is just, so awesome. I personally, I love your tool. So I'm thank you for making it.
Thank you.
Cool, Frederick. So if anyone, first of all, thank you for coming on. And if anyone wants to reach out to you or to find you, where can they reach out to you?
Well, they can go to compliancegate.com. We have hundreds of free guides and some PDFs they can download completely for free. And I also want to comment that absolutely a software can never replace a human, ever. Ever, but in my lifetime anyway. That's what I believe. And absolutely not now in 2021. And I really believe that yes, it is necessary for in many cases to get an assessment done by a proper living, breathing compliance consultant. Yeah.
Cool. Frederick, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And for the listeners, Isabella will be back on Monday and Danny will be back on Tuesday, and I will see you all next Thursday. Frederick, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Sharon.